We're looking at the Selenka, Professor Emil Selenka, organized an expedition but then died, but then his wife took it up. The Selenka Trinil Expedition of 1907 to 8. And we're down there halfway through it. And they concluded that it actually refuted Dubois' point about JavaMan. Rather, its purpose was supposed to confirm it. Yet it actually eradicated its effectiveness and basically concluded that JavaMan was a modern man. So goes some species between ape and man, an intermediary species. And so goes the support for evolution and the support for many different variables within the human species of modern man. Looking at could have been avoided. We concluded then it did not occur to Blankenhorn that their work was not fruitless, but had produced very positive results. It showed that humans have wide morphological variation, sometimes that anthropologists have only recently come to appreciate. It is possible that the variation in early humans could have exceeded what it is today. Yeah. Although the Selenka Expedition is universally considered to have failed in its primary purpose to support Dubois' discoveries, in true scientific terms it was a resounding success. Had the wide variation in the human family been appreciated at that time, many of the later mistakes in anthropology could have been avoided. But it was swept under the carpet. So, in light of the expedition's findings, it is interesting to see how evolutionists have handled the Selenka report. With one exception, the newer works on paleoanthropology ignore the Selenka report completely. About half of the works written between 1945 and 1975 mention the expedition or the report, but do so in such a way that it would be impossible for the English-reading researcher to discover what the Selenka report actually said. It's an amazing conspiracy of silence. And amongst people of all over the world of evolutionary faith. I have written at length, this is Lubenow's in Bones of Contention, on the background and details of Dubois and his JavaMan. I've done so to show that one of the conclusions of this book, that Homo erectus was not our evolutionary ancestor, but lived as a contemporary of more modern humans, is not original with me. Others had it also. The evidence has existed for 100 years. Dubois himself had 3 warnings of it. One, the Trinil femur, the bone, leg bone, and skullcap evidenced wide morphological diversity in a single contemporaneous population. Dubois rejected that evidence. 2, Wadjak and Pithecanthropus demonstrated the possibility that humans having wide morphological diversity had lived together. Now, Dubois retaliated the diversity had lived together. Dubois retaliated by hiding Wadjak for 30 years. The Selenka Expedition confirmed that humans with wide morphological diversity had lived together in recent times. Dubois responded by claiming that the Selenka findings were fraudulent. Lubenow, in his work, pages 127 to 133, it's a must-get book, especially for Christians who want to get the evidence presented to them in a more scientific manner than the evolutionists have presented, especially eliminating this entire report that took a year to produce, massive amounts of earth removing. JavaMan, which is formerly Pithecanthropus 1, was the first of at least 222 similar fossil individuals that have been discovered to date. It would be impossible to exaggerate the importance of this group of fossils, known collectively as Homo erectus. For the evolutionists, Homo erectus is the major category bridging the gap between Australopithecines, which everybody recognizes as non-human, and the archaic Homo sapiens and Neandertal fossils, which everyone recognizes as truly human. So much for intermediary life form. Surprisingly, Homo erectus furnishes us with powerful evidence that falsifies the concept of human evolution. 3 questions are crucial. First, is Homo erectus morphologically distinct enough to warrant its being classified as a species separate from Homo sapiens? The evidence clearly says no, by every legitimate standard applicable. For we see the fossil and cultural evidence indicate that it should be included in the Homo sapiens taxon. Second, flies are flying in my mouth. The Homo erectus fossils found in relevant time frame so as to serve as a legitimate transitional form. Clear answer from the fossil record is again no. Homo erectus individuals have lived side by side with other categories of true humans for the past 2 million years, according to evolutionist chronology. This fact eliminates the possibility that Homo erectus evolved into Homo sapiens. This 2 million year contemporaneousness has been largely camouflaged is attributed to the skill of evolutionist writers. They should be politicians. In effect, they are. The third question is whether or not there are adequate non-evolutionary explanations for Homo erectus, archaic Homo sapiens, and Neanderthal morphology. And the answer here is yes. Adequate non-evolutionary explanations. So you don't have to force evolution into the picture. It's a design creator. Lots of variation within that one species. When people become aware of the massive misrepresentation of the dates for the Homo erectus material, they act perplexed. But the factual evidence is so clear that it cannot successfully be challenged. Well, it can be ignored, and that's what they've done. The perplexity usually gives way to the question, why do evolutionists do this? The answer is obvious. If the date range of all the fossils having a Homo erectus morphology were commonly published on a chart, it would be clear that human evolution has not taken place. Lots of variation. On the far end of the Homo erectus time continuum, Homo erectus overlaps the entire Homo habilis population. Thus, the almost universally accepted view that Homo habilis evolved into Homo erectus becomes impossible. For habilis to evolve into erectus, habilis must precede erectus in time by a whole lot. Furthermore, after habilis has evolved into erectus, habilis must be eliminated by death, because erectus is supposedly the better fit of the two in the intense competition for limited resources. The fossil record also shows that Homo erectus lived alongside the group known as archaic Homo sapiens, and that Homo erectus lived alongside a more modern form of Homo sapiens. When a creationist emphasizes that, according to evolution, descendants can be living or as contemporaries with their ancestors, the evolutionist declares in a rather surprised tone, "Why, that's like saying that a parent has to die just because a child is born." However, in evolution, one species, or a portion of it, allegedly turns into a second, better adapted species through mutation and natural selection, according to them. However, in the context of human reproduction, I do not turn into my children. I continue on as a totally independent entity. Furthermore, in evolution, a certain portion of a species turns into a more advanced species because that portion of the species allegedly possesses certain favorable mutations which the rest of the species does not possess. I would say aside here that if the inferior species continues to exist, it will contaminate the superior species and bring it back down and destroy the evolution process. Thus it must die off. Thus the newer, more advanced group comes into direct competition with the older, unchanged group and eventually eliminates it through death. The older group is not able to compete successfully for the limited resources available. The competition and eventual death of the less fit is indispensable to the evolutionary process. So they say. Creationists say we all exist together as a designed creation with many variations within it. By God. However, in the human reproductive process, I do not compete with my child. I divide all of my resources to the survival of my child, not to his death. The analogy used by evolutionists is without logic, and the problem of contemporaneousness remains. It's a godless philosophy to begin with. Lacking grace, the unfortunate, the inferior species must be killed off. Let's do it ahead of time. Advancement for serial killers. That's awful. Terms like Homo erectus and Homo habilis are convenient terms to use in reference to groups of fossil material. But it is obvious that when evolutionists give dates for Homo erectus that do not fit the fossil material, and when they say that Homo habilis evolved into Homo erectus, contrary to what the fossil material shows, they are using those terms in a manipulative manner without regard for the fossil material in those categories. While evolutionists have not yet developed a formal definition for Homo erectus, a suite of characteristics is generally accepted. And here's what we have. Skull low, broad, and elongated. Cranial capacity 750 to 1250 cc. Median sagittal ridge, suborbital ridges, postorbital construction, receding frontal contour, occipital bun or torus, neutral area extended for muscle attachment, cranial wall unusually thick overall, brain case narrower than the zygomatic arch, heavy facial architecture, alluvial muscular prognathism, large jaw, wide ramus, no chin or mentum, teeth generally large, postcranial bones heavy and thick. You're going to look these up. Where there is material for comparison, the cow swamp fossils, as well as the other robust Australian fossils, fit the other above description well, allowing for reasonable genetic variation. They qualify as Homo erectus, as the evolutionist uses the term. The evolutionists attempt to explain the cow swamp fossils and others by calling them the result of an isolated population that was removed from the evolutionary mainstream also fails. While most of those robust fossils were found in southeast Australia, the Cossack skull was found on the west coast of Australia 2,000 miles away, and the Java Solo people were found 3,000 miles away in Indonesia. We are dealing with a continent-wide phenomenon. Furthermore, the Cossack skull has a maximum age of 6,500 years ago, but a minimum age of just a few hundred years. It sounds like an evolutionary new species. Thus, it is possible that Homo erectus, whom the evolutionist claims is our evolutionary ancestor, walked the earth just a few hundred years ago. Modern humans have a cranial capacity range from about 700 cubic centimeters all the way up to 2,200. So that kind of sets it right in the middle of Homo erectus, our ancestor. Maybe he's living alongside of us, our contemporary. Stephen Molnar. This range, a factor of 3, is an amazing speed and is most unusual in the biological world. It is recognized that this spread has virtually nothing to do with intelligence, because human intelligence is more dependent upon how the brain is organized than on sheer brain size alone. The cranial capacity of Homo erectus goes from about 700 cc, Java, Mojokerto, infant, to about, he was an infant, so how old you? To about 1,200 cc, the largest Peking man skull. The Neanderthal cranial capacity begins at about 1,250 cc, Sakastapastori 1, and goes to about 1,740 cc, Amud 1 Israel, with a